I'm Jane Applegath. This is the Epic Vision Zone, where bold ideas meet extraordinary leaders. What if your home is amplifying habits, both the ones that move you forward and the ones that keep you stuck? And what if designing your home with intention could unlock more flow, connection, and meaning? Talor Stewart is an award-winning architect and the visionary behind the book Conscious Home Design: The Guide to Living Your Best Life, a #1 international bestseller in 7 countries. Taylor's book helps transform homes into spaces for personal growth and lifestyle needs. For over 25 years, Talor has pioneered a revolutionary approach to architecture that goes far beyond aesthetics, revealing how intentional design increases flow, reduces friction, supports well-being and connection. His philosophy: when our inner life aligns with our outer environment, Taylor believes our homes can become living partners in our evolution. Through conscious home design, he shows how spaces can support health, strengthen relationships, and anchor a deeper sense of meaning and spirituality in everyday life. Working across the US and internationally, from single-family homes to intentional communities, Taylor also certifies architects and designers in the CHD method, expanding his life-enhancing work into the world. Taylor says, just as you pay attention to fitness, nutrition, and sleep, your home quality shapes your energy every single day. When a home supports flow, life moves with greater ease. When it doesn't, it meets resistance. Today, we're diving into how small intentional shifts in design can transform your home into a foundation for clarity, vitality, and consciousness. Thank you, Taylor, for joining us here today. Great to have you.
Great to be here, Jane. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your kind words and your very thoughtful introduction there. You clearly have done your homework and really hit the nail on the head. I think everybody today knows about the mind-body connection. Conscious home design and my work as an architect is to help people more deeply understand the mind-body environment connection and be able to put that to work for them, to serve them, and help them reach their goals more quickly and easily.
Wow. Yes, that makes all the sense in the world. We're always talking about environment. We're always thinking about the outer environment, but our homes, of course, have a huge reflection on who we are and the energy that we carry with us every day and every night. So give us an idea, Taylor, because this is so fascinating. What inspired you to do the work that you do today?
I think it was with me since childhood, the sort of the builders or the placemakers mindset. Uh, at the time, as I was growing up, I didn't quite see it, but looking back, they say you connect the dots in reverse. So it was really, as a young man trying to, scratch my head going, what am I going to do with my life? How can I plug into the world and add value? Suddenly a light bulb went off. I was like, oh, of course, I'm going to be an architect. It was always there. I just never saw it. And so, I went to college and got my bona fides, and here I am, a licensed, multi-state licensed architect. And, conscious home design, that's a specific sort of lens that I approach the discipline with. And I found this, it goes back to my college days, actually. It took me 20 years before I published the book, Conscious Home Design, because it took me a lot of time in the industry practicing, learning and testing things out and growing and developing my craft before I was able to really sort of consolidate and gel what are the main things that everyone needs to know, about that mind body environment connection, right? I didn't want to just create another style guide or something that was based on, aesthetic preference or opinions. I was looking for things that were rooted in science that would be more universally applicable to all people. And so I found that in architecture school, specifically, particularly because the projects that we did were just pretend. They didn't have a specific client that you could dive into and understand who they were as an individual. I found that the practice of architecture, at least at the academic level, it was highly intentional because architects are very thoughtful people. We want to really think through why we make design choices and decisions, and there needs to be some sort of anchor point behind it. Um, that said, they were very intentional, but at the same time unconscious. It was more about the building and less about the people that were going to be using this space. And today we find ourselves spending, the average person spends half their life in their home. And for the people that are actually have shifted and adapted and are now working from home, there's people are spending 90% of their life in their home. And so, Winston Churchill has this beautiful quote: "We shape our buildings, and thereafter they shape us." And so, we just want to make sure that we shape them in a way that is supportive, that produces flow rather than creates friction. Because you don't want your environment to be working at cross purposes. You don't want to feel like you're having to navigate an obstacle course in your day-to-day life. Um, so conscious home design really grew out of that sort of unconscious, that out of a response to just cold, hard structures. It's architecture is, for me, is less about the building and more about the people living there. In the same way that a poet, a book of poetry is not about pages and ink. That's just the medium to deliver a beautiful human experience. And the home is not about sticks and bricks. It's just the medium to deliver a human happily ever after experience. So that's the lens of conscious home design.
Wow. Thank you for that insight that you were a very aware individual at a young age, because back in those days, we're much
Mm-hmm.
more attuned now to consciousness and awareness, and we hear about it, in the mainstream, but back in the day they would say, "What the heck are you doing, Taylor? I mean, this is, this is architecture. We don't care. We're not talking about the people inside. We're talking about the shape of the building, the look. I mean, that is just incredible that you had that awareness at that time to understand that it's more about the people inside than just the structure on the outside, which is interesting because that goes back to your work. The inner reflects the outer. So, yeah, that really comes
Mm-hmm.
together and
Mm-hmm.
marriages beautifully. Well, thank you for that insight. And it makes me even more excited to delve into this. So, what does research then tell us about what makes people happy as they age? In particular, you mentioned a Harvard study on adult happiness. So give us some insight
Mm-hmm.
into that, because you mentioned you wanted to delve more into the science.
Yes, Jane, thank you. This is a great uh, point. I always knew I was going to write this book. Um, I didn't expect that it would take me, 25 or 20 years, to get it out the door. If you had asked, 25-year-old Taylor what my sort of career trajectory would look like, and my certain milestones that I would achieve, getting the book published at year 20, in my profession was not my original plan. But it is what it is. You can't pull the skin off a snake. It sheds when it's time, and it just took that long organically for it to come to fruition. um, like I mentioned, I didn't want to just create another style guide, or something about a design preference, something that was rooted in personal opinion. And so as I was researching, science-based studies that I could reference and draw upon to create a framework and a methodology to support people in measurable ways that are, impactful, not just like, oh yes, I feel good, but things that the data actually show to support, health and happiness, and even our life expectancy. I came across the Harvard study among many others, but this one was profound because um, they studied thousands of individuals. It's the largest and longest running study of its kind in the world. It began in 1938 and it's still going on to this day. So here we are, I guess we're about 88 years into it so far. Again, they've studied thousands of individuals, and what they found as they tracked them through their entire lives is that regardless of the ups and downs that everybody faces, they may have had career changes, they may have had business success or failures, they may have had health challenges, they may have had financial opportunities and lived in a beautiful large house, or they may have come, from a lot of struggle and strife and had a modest house. Some of them even with maybe without running water, at times. They found that all of these things matter and they make a difference, but the single biggest predictor, the biggest factor that contributed to people's sense of fulfillment and having a rich life, and also translated into actual life expectancy, affecting people's longevity, was the quality of their relationships. And so when I came across that, I said, okay, stop the presses. We can't publish a book without camping out here and figuring out a little bit more about that. What does that really mean? Because here they are saying scientifically, from studying thousands of individuals over decades, the single biggest predictor of life expectancy and happiness is relationships. And so the highest calling of architecture is to help people live happily ever after, to help people live their best life. And so I asked myself, well, what would it look like? Is it possible, to design homes to intentionally foster and support relationships? And by the way, what does relationship even mean? That's a big word. It's very vague. And so I had to really, first try to embrace this concept of relationship and get my arms around it. What does that mean? So that, because if I can't measure it and identify it, and qualify it, then I can't set it as a target. This idea of relationship is just too big and broad. We can't measure that, from a perspective of systems thinking and planning space and organizing and, being sort of goal oriented. The math is very beautiful because I think we all understand intuitively, Jane, that relationships are important to us. It's the reason we get up out of bed in the morning in so many cases. It's like, oh, yes, I do everything for my family. I want to spend all my free time, with my friends or with my family. Relationships are what make life fun. It's what makes life meaningful. But without the math there, without the data that the science that the Harvard study showed us, this desire to have strong connections or to have relationships activated in our lives, in our experience, it stays sort of on a wish list, and it's just like a nice to have. But once we have the proof that says, no, when we do this, we actually statistically live longer, it allows us, it gives us permission to move it onto our must have list. And it helps us, prioritize and say, no, we're going to, this is worthwhile. This is a worthwhile pursuit. What can we do? The Harvard study was very clear that relationships are not limited to a romantic partnership. So even single people can have a long, rich, healthy, happy, life. So, the Greeks, as I researched, I found out the Greeks have 7 different words for love, depending on how it shows up, whether it's between, a parent and a child, or between 2 best friends, or between a person in their community, or between, spouses or significant others, boyfriend, girlfriend. And so, that would be eros or filial or agape or storge, et cetera, et cetera. All that's interesting, but I wanted to know more, so I kept digging. What I found is that all of the diverse kinds of relationships that we have in life at different stages, different phases, different, qualities of relationship, they all fit into one of what I've identified as 3 broad categories. And those are our giving relationships, our receiving relationships, and reciprocal relationships. And so, um, I can qualify those if you want, and we can get into the particulars of what each one of those looks like, if you want. But I just, wanted to pause and see if you had any thoughts or feedback before, so I
Well,
don't just end up
no, that
rambling on and on and on here.
No, that sounds fascinating. That really, for you to have broken that down, it really is interesting, and it actually segues into our question with the different relationships that you just mentioned, and how
Hmm.
does that translate into home design? I know you're probably getting there, but just
Hmm.
continue on with your
Hmm.
story. Yes, and how you mentioned those three, the giving, the receiving, the reciprocal, and then just to expand that into the work that you do. Absolutely.
Sure. Great. Sure thing. Jane, I like to give people this sort of 10,000-foot overview, which is sort of the why. Because once you know the why behind something, if I just give someone the how, they're less likely to apply it and implement it for themselves if they don't have the why behind it. So I give this big overview, a little bit of a story and history behind it, but now we're coming in, starting to get more specific. Like the plane is coming down for a landing. We're about to have touchdown, and so um, the three qualities of relationships. So, giving relationships are ones where we show up as the primary giver in the exchange. And it's true. I think we all know this. There's no such thing as a 100% one sided relationship. Relationship, the very word implies, an exchange. But at face value, the relationships are giving, receiving, and reciprocal. So our giving relationships, we show up as the primary giver. Examples of this are ones where we are a teacher, a coach, a mentor. Um, also, if we're parenting, we're raising children, or teaching or babysitting children, looking after young people. Giving relationships also extend to plants and animals, whether those animals are our pets, or even if you have a bird feeder outside for the wild animals. That's an example of a giving relationship that you've initiated. And so giving relationships are important for us because they get us out of our own bubble, and they encourage us to connect with the world around us, and they expand our consciousness and our sense of self. And it's very healthy for us to have giving relationships. They allow us to grow and stretch. Uh, Reciprocal relationships are ones like you and I are having right now, Jane. It's two people show up, stand on their own 2 feet in their respective fields of knowledge, and there's a give and take. There's an exchange of energy or ideas, of conversation. And in a giving relationship, I may have to show up with my best behavior. I may have to have a role model face on, especially if I'm teaching children or something. But in a reciprocal relationship, I can let my hair down and just speak more casually from the heart. And there's a give and take. It's a different quality of relationship, and it allows us to develop our personalities in a different way. And so again, it expands our circle, but it also helps us develop, our own self in a different way. So examples of that are, between friends, colleagues, coworkers, spouses, or significant others. Anyone where there's an equal footing, or at least a good exchange, a give and take. Moving on to the receiving relationships, those are the ones where we are the primary beneficiary of someone else's care and wisdom. And so these are relationships that we have with our coaches or teachers or mentors, relationships that we have with our parents and ancestors or elders. Relationships that we might have with heroes or inspirational figures, spiritual figures, anyone where we're going to receive inspiration, encouragement, love, wisdom, care, something that's going to remind us that we're not alone, and that someone actually wants the best for us, and is giving us um, that little lift to stretch and reach our potential and show up as the best version of ourselves, whatever that looks like for you today. Because one day to the next, it's not always consistent, right? We do the best we can with where we are. And so, but those relationships are valuable to us because they feed us, and they give us, they remind us to stand in our, solid on your own 2 feet, centered in your own being, and from that place of support and self-awareness and love, then we can then um, engage, how does how do we show up in life, if we remember that we're loved and encouraged, it changes. It's a ripple effect that goes out. So those are the three kinds of relationship. And as an architect, I asked myself, what would it look like if we intentionally designed spaces to support not just relationships in general, but these specific nuances of giving, receiving, and reciprocal relationships in the home. And so people naturally would say, oh, well, the kitchen, that's where I prepare food for my family. That's sort of a giving space, and oh, the living room, that's where I sit to have a conversation or tell stories about life, with other people. That's sort of a reciprocal space, um, and that's true. Some spaces naturally feel more of one quality or another. But I asked myself, is it possible, what would it look like? And is it even possible to have intentionally created opportunities for all three kinds of relationship in every room of the home? And so this is really where the rubber meets the road. And this is where we actually get down to the little things that we can do, because even little 2% shifts make a big difference. And even if you're renting an apartment, and have no plans to do any big renovation or anything, you can still do things that make an impact. And this is good news, because going back, Harvard says when we do these things about our relationships, it's the single biggest predictor of our happiness and life expectancy. And so to think that we can actually take a little bit of initiative in our own home, even if it's just a rental, to get some support in that direction is wonderful. And so here's some examples. I liked I set myself a challenge and said, okay, well, if I could do it in this room, I'll certainly be able to do it in any other room in the house. So I started with a room that traditionally people do not think of as a space where we cultivate relationships, and that is the bathroom. The bathroom is our private space. It's a place where we oftentimes go alone. It's where we take care of our body. We just have to, do our business and shut the door. And that's true. But at the same time, it's also very ripe ground to remind ourselves of our connections and that we have with others, with the world. And so, examples of giving relationship in the bathroom. If you have a window, by all means, put a plant or two there. Either on the windowsill or hanging from the top if the windowsill's too small, or even on a plant stand or a shelf nearby. Um, Not only does that give you a chance to engage with something else, it's very low maintenance too. Like once a week, take 3 steps from the sink over to the plant and give it a little water and prune off a dead leaf, and it's so it doesn't take a lot of time to manage that. But there's also a physiological benefit to that. We've found that no matter how beautifully designed a space is, the plain fact of the matter is human bodies did not evolve in buildings. We evolved in nature. And so when you could show 1,000 people a very beautiful building, and everyone might agree, hey, that's a beautiful building. Maybe it's not my style. I prefer a classic, or I prefer a modern, or people have their preferences, but everyone could agree that it's a beautiful building. However, you won't get the same physiological response from those 1,000 people that are looking at that building if you hook them up to biological measuring equipment. Whereas if you show 1,000 people a nature scene, if you show people green growing things, um, whether people might have their preference. Oh, I prefer the beach, or an ocean scene, or oh, I like a mountain scene, or and it happened to be looking at a meadow with some trees. So people may have their preference of what kind of nature scene is their favorite. However, showing 1,000 people the green growing scene, that nature scene, is still, even though it may not be their preference of their favorite nature scene, they all are going to have a physiological response of showing calming of the brain waves, of the alpha waves. Breath is going to be less shallow and be more deep and more regular. And heart rate is also people can achieve a resting heart rate more quickly and easily when they see these things, when they see nature, green growing things. And that's going to lead to, reduced blood pressure. and less stress. And we all know that stress, shortens life expectancy. And so no matter how beautiful your home is, and this is going to be very strange for people, as a message to be coming from an architect who specializes in the built environment, to be saying this, but no matter how beautifully designed your home is, it still sends a subconscious signal and cue to your brain that you're not in your natural habitat. It's a foreign environment, and therefore is going to elicit a slight stress response. Now your home is your sanctuary, and compared to the outside world where all the chaos and unpredictability of life is going on out there, your home may be very peaceful and very tranquil and truly a sanctuary. It may really calm you down to be at home and relax. Still, it can be even more so, more calming for us if we have green growing things. So put some plants. The more the better. Put them everywhere. Be liberal and generous with the amount of plants and flowers and natural growing things that you bring into your home. So that's has a dual benefit there. Of not only that they're giving relationship, but also there's science behind having the plants in there too. Look, if you don't have a window in the bathroom, then put in a full spectrum light bulb. There are plenty of plants that can do just fine under full spectrum, light. And we're not growing bananas. You don't have to create a tropical rainforest in there. Just go to your garden center and tell them what you're planning to do, and they'll recommend you to the types of plants that are going to thrive in that situation. Taking it one step further, Jane, what about putting a fishbowl in your bathroom? Then you come in the morning, it's like, hi, fish. You sprinkle a little food on top, and now there's life. There's like a spark of joy, and you've taken one step further. Instead of being a dead utility space, it's like it's taking a little step towards making it an oasis, or a garden. You've got a couple of plants and a goldfish in there, and so it's just a fun thing. Obviously you have to, this has to suit your lifestyle. I'm just offering some examples. Everyone has to choose what feels right for them. Yes. But these are examples of giving relationships in a bathroom. And so reciprocal relationships, we see this commonly, especially in the master suite. You see two sinks, so you can brush your teeth side by side with someone else. If you have more space, especially if you're, designing a new home, you could put a big tub that's big enough for two. It's very relaxing. It's bonding. It's romantic. You can create an opportunity there, or even just for efficiency's sake. What about a shower room that's big enough? It has two separate heads on it. So instead of having to take turns and work around each other's calendars of who gets bathroom time at what time, you can shower together, and even if you're not talking, the data shows that just being in proximity, having that togetherness can really create a sense of stability and connection and support, and a feeling of support in your life, having that routine. So again, if it suits you, if you choose that for your lifestyle, these are examples of reciprocal relationship. And then receiving relationships, I think um, people could find an image of someone that inspires them, or someone that cares about them, and put that up somewhere. So if you're washing your face or brushing your teeth or something, you can see that and just take a moment to remind yourself that you're loved, or that someone's encouraging you, someone's cheering you on. Hey, I want the best for you. And so this is really the alchemy of mindfulness, because just putting a picture of someone up in the bathroom, or putting a plant, it's probably not really going to change your life. But if you do it intentionally, you know, I know that when I work out at the gym, my trainer says, look, don't just do the machines. I want you, when you're working out, to, with 100% of your attention and concentration at this moment, focus on the muscle groups that are being activated. And, in 6 months' time with him, I do better than 3 years on my own. It's like the mind body connection is powerful and tangible. And so this is a moment where you just, for 3 seconds in your morning and evening routine, look at that picture, and remind yourself of that connection. And that's the power in doing it. And so, look, if it feels weird to have a picture of grandma, of granny on the in your bathroom, no problem. Just take a quote, or something that someone wrote to you in a letter that means something, and write that out, and put that thing up on your mirror where you can see it. It's very subtle. It doesn't have to be, so prominent and in your face, but you can just go over that almost like an affirmation. And so, how reaffirming that love, that support, that connection that you have, um, how does that change how you show up every day in the world? Like, does that set, those ripple effects that go out? We're working with the butterfly effect, right? Even these tiny little 2% shifts. The mathematician wrote a paper: do the flapping of a butterfly's wings in Brazil eventually set off a tornado in Texas? And he charted it out. He showed mathematically, that the logarithmic curve on how little things become big things. And now it's true that not all little things become big things, but all big things started as little things, and there's a mathematical progression to that. And so if we want big results in our life, we can start small intentionally and see what happens, over years. If you now let's That's the bathroom. If we took these concepts and moved them around throughout our whole house, the question I have is, what would it look like if every day you felt, cumulatively 8% less stress, 8% more on purpose? How do you show up in life, and what does that do over years or decades of living in that space? What sort of compounding interest, is that going to turn into? And so that's conscious home design. Obviously, the ability to build a brand new home from scratch gives you a quantum leap into creating your future and shaping your destiny. But even little 2% shifts here and there, doing the best you can with the walls you already have, can still compound and create massive impacts for you over time.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's all the small things that add up. And the message on the mirror, you hear that often in coaching. They'll say,
Uh-huh.
give yourself a positive affirmation, the
Uh-huh.
I am, put it on the mirror. I hadn't heard about the plant or the goldfish, but I could see that. I mean, it just, because
Yeah.
I like plants. And it's really something to have a little plant and then see it grow. It's very, very, it's
Mm.
satisfying. It's like,
Mhm.
wow,
Mhm.
I've helped
Mhm.
this thing grow. So yes, I could understand all of the
Mhm.
triggers that will create when you come into that space. And that's the energy that you start to, like you said, you can work from a space that gives you life, that's giving you life, like you said, or if you work from a space
Mhm.
that's just cold and empty. I mean, it really, it will affect you. Oh, even though you don't know it is affecting you. So, thank you for that. It's
Sure.
it's very insightful, it's very profound, and yet they're very small. It's I haven't read the book, but I
Mhm.
know Atomic Habits, but it's all about changing the little
Mhm.
things,
Mhm.
and this is
That's
very
right.
much the same. Only it's
Mhm.
it's like your atomic living. It's changing the little things where you live that make the
Mhm.
difference. Yeah, to your
Mhm.
space.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Just like
thank
a
you for
tree
that.
root is gonna move a sidewalk over time, because that slow, steady,
Mm,
constant
yeah.
24/7 pressure, even though wood
Hmm.
is softer than cement, the tree wins because of the constant
Right.
pressure. And so,
Right.
our environment is always exerting a constant pressure on us. And so, um, you know, I mentioned the quote from Winston Churchill, that sort of wisdom of the West. Wisdom of the East, a quote from Yogananda, is he said, environment is stronger than willpower. And
Mm.
when I first read that, I thought to myself, a part of me, I felt resistance. I was like, no, that can't be true, because I didn't want to feel like I'm not powerful or not able to achieve my hopes and dreams. I want to feel like my will is strong enough to overcome my environment. And so, but I had to be scientific about it and be open. I can't just say, no, I don't like the sound of that and then be in denial. So I heard that and I said, okay, fine. I noticed some resistance, but how is that true? And if it's true, is there a way that I can use that to my advantage so I can successfully navigate this reality? And so, on the one hand, if you want to become, I don't know, a doctor in life, then if you hang out with a bunch of accountants, it's going to be difficult. Whereas if you hang out with a bunch of other medical students and the discussions are always around, health related things or things to do with the body and healing or whatever, then you're going to find it's going to be a little bit easier to become a doctor yourself. And so there's a social aspect to that truth, environment being stronger than will. The quality of the company we keep can affect the trajectory we have in life. But there's also a physical truth to this as well. And so if we're in a space that is not supportive of us, then it's going to make it harder to achieve our goals. Seth Godin coined this concept of the 10,000 hour rule. He says if you if you invest 10,000 hours into a subject, you can that's sort of the rule of thumb to achieve expert level status, or mastery in it. And obviously, some things take more. Rocket science is a little more complicated than accounting. And so some have more, some have less. To get competency in it. But this 10,000 hour rule is a nice sort of rule of thumb, and it makes sense. We all understand. Hey, it takes practice makes perfect. It takes time. It takes effort if you want to accomplish anything in life. We know this. But what's missing from this common sense formula is that it also takes space to be successful. If you say, I want to prepare 3 healthy meals, nutritious meals for myself every single day, but you don't have a kitchen, it's very hard for you to achieve your goal. Like in college, you can live in a dorm room with a microwave and a hot pot, and you can live on ramen noodles and coffee for a few years, and we can survive that. But over decades of living like that, your nutrition is going to suffer, and you're going to die younger. you know you're it's not going to serve your body. And so having spaces dedicated to our activities are essential to achieving our goals. And that goes for everything, not just our physical needs like sleeping and eating, but for our personal development needs and our self-development and our creative expression and our growth. If you look at Maslow, the hierarchy of human needs pyramid, we you can give someone shelter, but that will keep them alive, but there's nothing there that says they're actually going to be happy or that they're going to thrive. To so to meet those needs, another framework that I use within conscious home design is the human needs pyramid, because I look at the average program, or functions of a home, and it's basically a place to eat, a place to sleep, a place to bathe, and a hangout space. It's basically 4 functions is the basic structure of the home. And as you grow your family, you may have more bedrooms. And nowadays we've added to that a home office, because the technology of the internet has made it possible for so many people to work from home. But before the internet, very few people worked from home. Very few.
Mhm.
Right now with the internet, it's a lot more. We've seen a huge societal shift. But aside from that, the essential program of a home hasn't changed in about 100 years. And so, yet
Yeah.
at the same time, the other disciplines of human excellence, from physical fitness to health and nutrition to psychology and healthy mind, all of these other professionals and disciplines have learned so much in those 100 years, much more than architecture has evolved. Architecture has evolved in terms of style and technology. It's like we use different building materials and we use different paint colors and stuff now, and slightly different designs. But that basic function of kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, hangout space is still the same. And so conscious home design is about borrowing from these other traditions, these other experts, because when we can learn from experts, we accelerate our progress more quickly. And the discipline of architecture is well served by consulting with other experts and saying, hey, what have you learned about human happiness? Let's
Mhm.
incorporate that into the homes and the places we shape so that we can help people live their best life. And so that's why I'm bringing these things in. I am not a coach. I'm not a doctor. I need to stay in my lane as an architect and stay within my competency, but I have passion and interest about these things. And so I draw from them to see if they can inform design. And that's how I came up with the conscious home design methodology.
Well, that makes total sense. I mean, we're affected by our dwellings, we're affected by our relationships. So yes, I mean, in a sense, yeah, it does bring all those elements together. Absolutely. If you surround yourselves with other experts in those areas, then the light bulb will go on. I always say I love to
Mhm,
surround myself um, with thinkers and creators because they elevate your thinking. They spark your curiosity.
mhm.
And we're all here to learn and
I
grow.
agree.
And if we don't explore, where would we be? I mean, we'd still be in the caves, you know. So this is
Sure.
it's fabulous because things are growing, and people like yourself are coming up with these ideas, and that's why I think that it's wonderful that we can share these, but also that people are tuning into them. It's not just, oh yeah, that guy, he does this, that. No, people are actually interested, and they're actually more aware. Like you
Mm,
and I had that conversation just before you came on, that there's a lot more awareness today than there was in the days,
mhm.
the older days when people would be, "What are you talking about? Conscious living? What's the matter with you?
Sure,
Are you a hippie?"
sure,
Um, but
sure, sure.
but certainly,
Right.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I wanted to go now, Taylor, to the sunny window effect. So you've mentioned
Sure.
that, I believe it's in your book as well. What is that, and why does it matter?
So the sunny window effect is a coin that I termed when writing the book, and it stemmed from my early childhood observations of when I was hanging out in a room and um, a beam of sun was coming through the window, and then it would a cloud would then pass, in front for a moment, and the room would dim, and then the cloud would go past, and then the room would get bright again. And I may be sitting on the couch reading a book, or on the floor playing a game or something, but I just this experience I noticed, and no matter how beautifully designed and well appointed a space may be, when that sun is shining in and filling it with light and warmth, it's so much more welcoming and inviting. And I found that even the family pets, whether it was the dog or the cat, that's where they would be. They'd be curled up in the sunny patch on the floor. It's like they could choose anywhere in the house to be, but they're going to be in the sunny window. That's we're inherently attracted to the light. Light is life. And so as an architect who wants people to live their best life, and that means helping them become the next version of themselves, whatever that looks like, whatever that means for them as an individual, I say, is there something that we can do to put this sunny window effect, this instinctual pull we feel towards a sunny room, to work for us to our advantage? And so one of the things I like to do is put the kitchen in the southeast corner if we're building a new home, because grandma always said that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And morning sun rises in the east, and that's going to make if you have a bright kitchen in the morning, that's going to be so much more welcoming and encouraging and if we spend an extra 5 or 10 minutes in our kitchens every morning preparing something beyond just coffee and a granola bar, then that's going to serve us nutritionally over time, right? And we'll be well served by having a more robust breakfast in the morning. And so going back to Maslow's, like we all have these, creative expression needs, or we have personal development needs, or even your home office. If your home office is in the northwest corner, and it's dark all day long, you may not feel very inspired, or if you have your home gym in the basement and it's dark and there's no sun and the air quality is bad, then you're not going to want to go down there if you're feeling tired or pressed for time. You're just going to like shut the door and be like out of sight, out of mind. But if you can, take an activity that's important to you, but yet you're having challenges, there's a hump to overcome every time to get you over this hurdle of starting or initiating or keeping your habit or your goal around that activity. See if there's a way that you can arrange your space so that when you perform that activity, it's at a time of day in a room that has bright sun coming in, and that way the space that you're in will give you a little lift and encourage you, and it will be a little less friction that you have to use your willpower, because we have a limited amount of willpower to spend every day. And so this is something where instead of spending willpower to fight our environment to make us do this thing, the environment is already making it easy for us. So it's putting the wind at your back. It's like a down, you just coast into it. So now any willpower is just, you can focus on just your inner game and just getting things done. And so this is the sunny window effect, the concept, and how it could look in action for you. So everyone needs to do their own self-assessment as they go through their home and go through their life and their stated goals and activities, and see if there's a way that they can use the sun to support them in that.
So yes, I agree. Light is life, and we all, as humans,
Mhm.
love, even if we don't realize it, the light does affect us. So my question is, if you don't have access to a window, say, or someplace,
Mhm.
what do you recommend something? Like, how can you brighten up a room if you don't have that window?
Well, in the home, very few rooms don't have a window because the building code requires a certain amount of natural light and natural ventilation for it to be technically considered occupiable space. The only rooms that by code are allowed to not have a window are utility spaces, bathrooms, kitchens, laundry rooms, entry foyers. But any space that you would call a bedroom has to have a window. A living room, a dining room, even something that you would call a home office, technically has to have a window in it. And the size of the window is governed by a ratio of certain amount of square footage of window to the floor, to the size, that floor area. You can't have a massive room with one tiny little, portal in it. That the code won't accept that. And so it's rare that someone would be in the situation where there would be no window at all. Um, that said, um, if you do find yourself in something like that, at one time, I did have an office with no window many, many, many years ago, because I was in a building that was 100 years old, and it had been chopped up, and I got this tiny little, space that had no window, and so I used full spectrum light bulbs and light paint color, um, that could, um, sort of simulate, a sunny day. I had sort of a light peachy orange tone on the walls. That a color that resonated to me, and like a dawn or a sunset color, and with the full spectrum light bulbs, and so it created a warmth in this room that I was able to work by. But by the way, this was a temporary thing. That was less than a year that I had this space, because you really do not want to be spending all day long in a space with no natural light.
Oh no.
You know, it's not good for us. The studies have shown very clearly that people that work the graveyard shift, where they sleep all day long and they're indoors all night long and they're not getting daylight. These people, they don't live as long as other people that follow the cycles of the sun. We're not meant to do that. So we really need the
Sure.
light. It's not
Yeah,
just,
I
again,
agree.
like the Harvard relationships. It's not just a wish list item. It's a must have.
I agree. Yes, absolutely. Well, we live in sunny Arizona, so of course we get
Sure.
sunlight almost all the time.
You live
So
in the Valley of
it's
the
it's
Sun.
it's
Absolutely.
wonderful. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I appreciate it
Yeah.
because even if you're not out baking in the sun, your house is still very bright. So, and that really makes a difference for sure. Well, your book
Mhm.
has become a number one bestseller in multiple countries, which is very interesting. So, what do you think this global response tells us about what people are craving right
Mm.
now? And give us a brief
Uh-huh.
synopsis of your book for the audience members.
Sure. So, I think, like I said, I wrote the book to be rooted in universal principles. And so conscious home design is not a style. Conscious home design is not, it's not feng shui or some sort of tradition. It's not a certain commitment to a certain kind of building materials. It's not alternative, straw bale or anything. It can be if you want to build an alternative home, you can and still use conscious home design principles, but it also works for a conventional home. So any style, any size, whether it's a cottage or a castle, anywhere in the world, the principles of conscious home design are universal. These are human issues, not issues of style or design per se. And so um, I think that's why the response has been so widespread with conscious home design. And I'm very happy that's the case. That's what I set out to do. I didn't want to write a book that was difficult for people to read. I wanted some there. There was I saw a thing, a video. I think it was a high school teacher, and he was doing this example where he took a jar and then he had sand and he had pebbles and then he had some larger rocks, and he said, if you don't put the big rocks in first, then there won't be room after you fill it up with all the pebbles and the sand, and the big rocks are the important things in life, and the sand are the less important things in life. And so it was a lesson about prioritizing. Mark Twain, when he was writing a letter to a friend, he said, I would have wrote you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. He was joking, talking about the effort it takes to consolidate and edit, and have something be short and sweet. And I hired 3 different editors to help me with my book so that I could refine it and write that short and sweet, accessible book. It's about 100 pages. You can read it in an hour. There's no jargon. Although it's rooted in science, it doesn't read like a textbook. It reads. It's very easy and accessible. Anyone can read that with zero design background at all. So I really wrote it as a bridge between the esoteric design profession and the non-design community, and said, look, these are the big rocks, the things that really matter, and if you know these things, then it will help you when you look at
Mm,
any built environment. It will help you more efficiently and judiciously evaluate if it's good, if it's going to support or not. And you won't be distracted by the bling. Oh, it's so shiny and beautiful. Yes, it may be, but having a perfect designer outfit doesn't do you much good if it's 3 sizes too small. You know what I mean? So the space needs to have proper flow and function first before we hang the ornamentation that we like upon it. And conscious home design helps people understand form and function and flow
mm.
first, and so that's why I think the book is appealing to people, and that's sort of the message contained therein. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. It's an easy read, and it's very the messages are very universal. It's not
Hmm.
targeted like every culture, every society can plug into that and get some benefit from it. So absolutely, yes, it makes a lot of sense. So Taylor, if you could deliver one message to the world, what would it be?
Mm. um I'm gonna start by just saying, um there is such a thing as a better floor plan. And
Mm,
architecture allows us to build, um, when we're able to take control of the space that we inhabit. It helps us shape our future. We can take control of our destiny when we take control of our home and the space we live in. And so this is, the home is not just beautiful shelter. The home is actually can be one of the most profound and powerful personal development and personal growth tools available to us if we're intentional about the way we shape it and interact with it. And the single biggest takeaway that I would offer people listening is to remember the relationships, that's the single biggest predictor of our happiness and our life expectancy, statistically our life expectancy. And so go through your home and look around and say, do I have opportunities for giving, receiving, and reciprocal relationships here? Are there any gaps? Where am I well supported? And where could I use more support? Are there any shifts that I'd like to make? You don't have to have all three kinds in every room of your house. Just do what feels right for you. But knowing that it's possible and knowing what examples could happen there, it now gives you a toolkit to start doing a self-assessment and an evaluation and start making some changes. The Conscious Home Design book is, like I said, it's an easy read, but there's also a companion workbook with that I partnered with someone who has a master's degree, dual master's degree actually, in social work and in psychotherapy. This person used to work for government, managing a team of people about social policy, but now they work one-on-one as a therapist, counseling individuals. This person read my book and uh, went through it with me, and together we wrote questions, because the quality of your question determines the quality of your results. If you ask good questions, you have good outcomes. And so there are certain questions that people may not know to ask when shaping their space, and I want, because they haven't spent the tens of thousands of hours that I have thinking about architecture. And so I I wrote the workbook in partnership with this person to make sure that we ask the right questions and leave no stone unturned. And so taking the concepts in Conscious Home Design book and applying them and seeing what they would look like for you specifically, that's done through the workbook. And
Mm.
that's available on my website, conscioushomedesign.com. So that's the big takeaway for people, is do a self-assessment. And if they want a little bit more guidance than what I've offered here, they can get the book and the workbook on at conscioushomedesign.com. Or they can
Mm.
pick my brain, fill out the contact me form if they want to do a private consultation with me and tell me what they're thinking. I'm happy to. I work on projects all over the country, coast to coast, top to bottom. So happy to help.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. And your website then, conscioushomedesigns.com, is there any other contact information, and where can people purchase your book and workbook?
Yeah. So conscioushomedesign.com. You can order my book through any bookstore. Go into your favorite local bookstore and say, "Hey, can you get me a copy of Conscious Home Design?" And it's available to order. You can also get it online at Barnes and Noble or Amazon or other online retailer. But the workbook itself is only available on my website. It's not available anywhere else. And so I currently have a bundle going on right now. It's the book, the audio book, if you like to listen to books on tape, or listen to a book while you're driving or working out or something, and the workbook as an instant digital download. It's a bundle that you can get. And if you want a physical copy, it's a little bit more, but I will sign it and snail mail it to you. And also you'll also get the instant digital download as well if you get that. So definitely, if you want to hold the book in your hand, you can order it through your bookstore or on my website. But if you want the workbook, then go to conscioushomedesign.com for that. Thanks, Jane.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm glad I asked. So that's perfect. I love it. Well, because we're here on the Epic Vision Zone, Taylor, I have one last question for you. If your
Sure.
life were an epic story, what would the title be?
Oh my. If my life were an
Mhm.
epic story, I don't know. Hope for the reckless. I don't know. My life has been quite an adventure story. I think that might be it. I'm not sure what we'd call it. But I believe in grace. I believe that the universe is, that everything that we see physically, there's a blueprint behind it. Everything is there's an energetic signature and pattern. There's a DNA pattern. That's non-physical, that's metaphysical before something becomes tangibly physical. And I believe that cosmic architecture is intelligently guided. I believe that the universe is intelligent. It's not just random chaos. And while that while life certainly does seem chaotic at times, it's simply because the governing forces at play, which are cause effect relationships. Newton's first law: for every action there's the equal and opposite reaction, right? And things once in motion tend to stay in motion. Newton defined these mechanics. We live by physical laws: electricity, gravity, action, reaction, cause, effect. These aren't necessarily systems of justice. These are systems of organization and structure. And so the universe is very cold and impersonal if you look at it from just purely from the law of it. And all the random events that are happening in life, the mind can't calculate the trillions of cause effect relationships that are already at play. And so life seems chaotic. But the fact of the matter is, everything has a cause behind it. So that's the universal sort of cold aspect of life, which is true. But there's also a very personal side of it, a very intelligent and loving side of it that is aware of every one of us as an individual. And there's grace when you approach the warm side, the personal side of creation. And I certainly have experienced it in my life. And so, this I make a joke: hope for the reckless. It's because despite all of my human mistakes and blind groping and seeking, I feel like my inner compass, my GPS, keeps through that grace, keeps helping me attune and find my flow in life. And so that's the story. That's my personal story, and I'm sticking to it.
I love it. That's really insightful and profound. I love that. Hope for the reckless, because there there is grace. There's always
Yes,
grace.
ma'am.
Yeah. I love
Yes.
that. I think that's great. That should be your novel. Really. It's
Maybe.
so very, very, very interesting, and I love that you've woven it through with the chaos that seems to be there, but the universe, it doesn't judge. There's no judgment in the universe. It just
Mm, mhm.
so but it always comes. We always come back to center if we remember those thoughts. So thank you so much for that closing statement. I love it. Thank you so much. Well, thank you again for joining us here today, Taylor, and reminding
My
us that
pleasure.
when our home is designed with intention, our life begins to move with purpose. And once again, for information and to connect with Taylor, go to the Epic Vision Zone bio pages, where you will find all of his social media and direct contact information, and information for the book and the workbook as well. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at Jane Applegath. Look me up at janeapplegath.com, and like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Epic Vision Zone. Sending you much love and gratitude. Until next time, stay visionary, lead with love, and stay epic.